Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, college coaches and college football fans. This is Coach Anthony Williams, founder and CEO of Connect Athletics. We are a new startup company based here in Austin, Texas, where we're building a technology platform that allows student athletes to tell their story, to share their journey about who they are on the field, but more importantly, who they are off the field and how have they successfully transitioned from high school to college to pros and then to a life after football is over. Before I get into our special guest tonight, let me thank my sponsors. First up is Buffalo Wild Wings. You're going to hear a lot from them because they are the official wing sponsor of NCAA March Madness. So I want to thank my good friend Brian Soltis, who's a regional VP there, based out of Houston, who is also a former student athlete and is also very passionate about giving student athletes and former athletes a platform to tell their story with. I also want to thank my friends up in Nebraska, Go Edit Graphics. If you are a high school or college athletic department and you want to add some customized graphics to your outbound communication, you should look up Zach and my friends up at Go Edit Graphics. They have customized templates and graphics that you can edit into your school colors and your mascot for all outbound communication, whether it's a player spotlight, a schedule change, or anything else. So check out the guys at Go Edit Graphics. Last sponsor is a good friend of mine out of Houston. Stefan Johnson has a new apparel company called Epic 247. Epic stands for Every Play I Compete. They've got some really exciting designs. If you're tired of the same old, store-bought workout gear, you should definitely check out Epic 247. They do high school uniforms. They do 7-on-7 jerseys, and they do a really nice job of workout gear. So check out those guys at Epic 247. With all that out of the way, somebody that I've known for a long time, feel like we're extended family. James Kirkendoll is our guest tonight. James grew up here in Round Rock, where I live, attended Round Rock High School, went to school here locally at University of Texas, graduated and went on and had a career in the NFL with the Tennessee Titans, and is now back. And I'm not going to give away the spoiler alert. I'll let him tell you what he's up to now that he's done with football and still being successful. James, how are you doing tonight?
Excellent, Mr. Williams. Just blessed to be able to come on your show, your podcast, and share some real game with the up and coming athletes.
No, I love that, James. You know how passionate I am about helping the next generation of student athletes with all the changes that are going around in the recruiting landscape and the NCAA. I can only imagine what you and Aaron and some of the other teammates from Texas would have done if you guys had NIL and social media back then. But that we'll get into that question later on. Let's just jump right in, James. You talked about giving back. You did a great job at my showcase a few weeks ago. Let's jump back to the beginning. When you're a talented athlete, you were as good in basketball as you were in football. Talk about your athletic development young, and when did you decide to focus on football?
Yeah, coming from Round Rock, it's a competitive area. My family, we came here from Indiana, so it was a basketball state. And then moving to Texas, obviously, the culture shock, for the football side of everything. I would say probably around middle school, that's when I really figured out that I had a potential future as far as doing that for a living, whether it was basketball or football. I have older brothers and older family members who were able to get scholarships and play at the next level as well. So I've always been pretty inspired to try to reach that highest level.
Yeah, no doubt. You definitely did that. So you're playing basketball, you ran track, you're playing football, you come into Round Rock, kind of an unknown, undersized. James, talk about, the game has changed even from back when you're playing in the late 2000s. If you weren't a big receiver or you didn't have big physical size at playing football, recruiting wasn't the same, but you were probably one of the first, I would say, undersized receivers who was fast, explosive, playmaker. Talk about how you overcame your lack of being a 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver and how it didn't stop you from achieving your goals.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Like you said, for us in my era, it was more so about the big physical guy, right? You had T.O., you had guys like Randy Moss. Myself, I looked up to Roy Williams. So I wanted to be Roy Williams, but I also knew I wasn't 6'3", 6'4", 220. Right. So for me, I just focused on my strengths, which was my IQ. I think is my biggest asset, or was my biggest asset playing. I was a student of the game. I knew all 11 spots on the field, offense and defense, special teams, and just focusing on my strengths, which was my speed and my quickness. Me and my stepdad, my brothers, we would get up in the summertime, 6 a.m. and then be on the field at 7, and then we couple hour workouts, and then later on in the afternoon we'd come back. So I would just say that what gave me the advantage was the work ethic. I knew I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the strongest. Most of the time I'd be up there as top as speed, but I knew that because I was smaller, I had to be that much better. Yeah. So mentality was every time I touched the field, I had to do something to make people remember me because I was smaller. So I really focused on what I was good at and mastering those aspects of my game.
Yeah, no doubt. It definitely paid off for you. So you're coming into Round Rock now, freshman. Round Rock, decent school, one of the largest schools in the area. Didn't have a lot of success, but let's talk about the most important thing. I know your parents focused on you was having strong academics. Talk about the work ethic. Talk about the time management that it took of being an elite athlete and still keeping your grades up.
Yes, sir. That was the number one thing in my household was academics. I was blessed to have great parents. My mother and my stepdad, they always pushed grades, and we knew that was going to be the advantage, right? Like I was just blessed to have parents that were able to see further than just the game of football. Mm-hmm. It was a great opportunity for me to go to school, get an education. But really, as far as the time management, my parents were real strict. Every day I got back from school or after practice, it was hit those books, and the mentality that they told me is, whatever you do in the classroom, it's going to translate over to the field. Mm-hmm. I always had that in my mind. And, at the end of the day, I was a huge competitor. I still am to this day. So I wanted to be the best scholar just as much as the best player possible.
Yeah, James, talk about that a little bit more. One of the things, you're an elite athlete, playing 3 sports in high school. A lot of being successful, from my understanding, and when I was an athlete, was time management. You could talk about, I'm going to be a great student athlete, I'm going to go play D1 football, but your action and where you put your time is really what you're really focused on. Talk about how you manage playing 3 different sports and keeping a very high GPA during high school.
Yep. So it's really just scheduling, right? Like, so my mother, my stepdad, I listed out the goals that I wanted to do. So we sat down and we would realistically map out a schedule to achieve these goals. So that meant, not attending certain parties, not playing the video games except for once a week, getting up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning for double workouts, just going that extra mile. At the end of the day, it's what's important to you, right? And that's kind of what my parents told me is, you got to work when everybody else is asleep, you got to work. Yeah. So that's what the mentality was, from academics to playing sports. And as far as academics, what I would do is I would stay after school. Like if I had troubles in, I don't know, let's say history, I would go in, I'd put the extra time in just like I would for academics. If I had to stay an hour after to sit with the teacher after school just to see what I could do to help boost my grades. Like, is there any area, is really identifying what your weaknesses are and, capitalizing and strengthening those to where you can balance everything out. I think that's the key.
Well, James, talk to these young athletes, and let's be honest, we always keep it real. There are athletes that are spending more time working on their 40 and their route running and pass catching and going to 7-on-7 than they are instead of focused on their algebra and their foreign language. What would you tell a young athlete right now that maybe he's got his priorities a little bit backwards right now? How could they correct that as they start the recruiting process?
Yep. I would just say my biggest advice is hit the books just as hard as you do the field, because that's what is going to be, it's going to last longer. The average NFL career, I guess, is 2 to 3 years. So you got a whole life to live after it. The biggest thing I always share with everyone in my story is, life is 4 quarters, just like any game you play, with the exception of baseball, obviously. But you're in the first quarter of your life, so it is very essential that you get your education, man, because that's the only thing you can really rely on at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy that life is 4 quarters for these young athletes that are listening. It'd be like you preparing for a game on Friday night and your preparation was all to have a great first quarter and forget about what you would do in the fourth quarter when the game gets tight and you're tired and maybe you got a couple of injuries and pressure and adversity and everything. So I think that's a great analogy for these young athletes to understand, is that, as you prepare for football, you don't prepare for 1 quarter or two, you prepare for all 4 quarters. And so they need to have that same perspective when it comes to life. I love that. So you're going through Round Rock High School, you're starting to develop, you become a big time player. I remember you as a sophomore, you really kind of hit the radar screen from a recruiting standpoint. Talk a little bit about your recruiting process, James, and what are a couple of nuggets you'd like to share with some of these athletes that are just now going through the recruiting process now?
Yes, sir. It was a lot different coming up in our era. We didn't have social media. I remember we used to, I'd have to go to my coaches, get game film, and I would physically have to chop up, I guess, highlights and manually do that.
Yeah.
And we would get with production companies, local production company. They were called Sharpshooter Video here in Austin. Yeah. We went to them and they put a highlight together. This is before like YouTube and all that. And we literally went to every school, all the schools I was interested in. I sent that tape to everybody. And, I also sent an email and a letter of why I was interested in the school. And by just doing that alone, I started to pique some interest. And what I did was, the schools that showed me the most interest off of that, I went ahead and said, hey, let's hit those schools, right? We hit schools, we would go to the summer camps or one-day camps. And essentially you're right in front of the school or the team you want to play for. So it was really just shaking hands or getting out and really touching these schools or these coaches and say, hey, I want to come to your school, because I think at the end of the day, that's what these coaches want to see, is what makes you different from everyone else, right? Yeah. There's 1,000 different people that want this one spot. Why you? So that's what we focused on. And our whole recruiting approach was trying to find a school that needed us, not wanted us, needed us, and could develop us, not just as an athlete, but as a human being. Mm-hmm. So that's why I decided, UT at the time was very much like an Alabama when I was coming up, and I felt, if I wanted to be the best, I had to go compete with the best. So it was kind of an easy decision as far as the athletics side of it. And then I also knew about the McCombs Business School. And yeah, at the time, I think UT still is, they were the #1 public school in the world academically. So that played a huge part as well.
Yeah. James, tell us a little bit about that recruiting process. I do a lot of, events and combines and All-American games. And a lot of kids seem to think that it's something that is, that's going to happen, because I was all district or because I was all county. And I'm constantly reminding these players, I'd love to hear your take on, is that, yeah, you're good here, but there's somebody as good or better in California that's not in your district that you're never going to see. That kid wants to come to Texas and go to Texas too. There's a kid in Georgia, a kid in Florida. Talk to these kids about, how did you not settle for being one of the best elite receivers in Round Rock, how you expand your scope and figured that, hey, if I want to go to Texas, I gotta be one of the top receivers in the country, not just in Central Texas. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yes, sir. Well, being that I was a dual sport athlete, I was exposed because I played basketball as well. I was exposed to just going to different national tournaments, right? So I was able to hit Vegas, I was able to hit LA, Chicago, Miami, New York, all these major markets, and I was able to see the talent level, the talent level, and then also just going to different combines for the football side of playing football. I went to different combines. I would go to a lot of regional combines, and my stepdad was kind of the spearhead on that, as far as, hey, these are where the best players are. We need to go there and prove ourselves.
Yep.
So mentality was, we scoped out, all the markets that we could reach, Dallas, Houston, Miami, LA. I mean, we traveled. It's an investment, really.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you just got to understand that, you're going to be the biggest fish in the pond, but what about the ocean? You got to look at it like that. I don't want to be the seaweed in the ocean. I want to be something. I want to be the free willy. That's how I looked at it. But yeah, that was the mentality, is wherever you go, there's a certain standard that you got to stand on and prove yourself. So I think my biggest advice is, just know when you're asleep, somebody else, they're training.
Yeah.
Because that spot.
Absolutely. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you go through Round Rock, you take them deeper than they've ever been in the playoffs. I think even now they haven't been as deep as you guys were. You guys had a great run. You're at Texas now, and now you're playing with Jordan Shipley and Colt McCoy and a lot of that team, some remnants of the team that had won the national championship in 2005. Talk about and one thing I want to hear from you is, James, there's a lot of high school players that think they are working hard. And I'm not saying that they're not, but talk about that difference between working hard in high school and then working hard, working out under Jeff Mad Dog Madden and the expectations of the University of Texas. Talk about that delta, that gap between the difference in high school and in college.
Yep. Back to time management, and I would say just accountability, really. How good do you want to be? Because back then, we went into literally the best program in the country. So it's either you're going to sink or swim. For me, once I got to UT, I did have a lot of greater guys ahead of me, like the Quans, Limas, Shipley. I mean, the list, Billy Pittman, the list goes on and on. So it's almost like when you're going into high school from middle school, you're the big man on campus in 8th grade, but as soon as you hit freshman year, everyone's bigger, faster, stronger. So it's every level you go up, you get humbled. When you come in, you learn the game. You have to build the foundation from ground up. And that's through academics, through workouts, team events. I mean, it all aligns together. So for me, the biggest challenge for me was really the pace, how fast everything goes. Because you're in study hall, you wake up. I went from high school, your typical high school schedule, 7 to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock is when you get out. We had 6 a.m. workouts in college. You had to go to class from like 8 to about 1 to 2 o'clock. You had to come back, watch film, then you hit practice. And it was literally, it went from as a hobby to becoming more so a job.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. So you're at Texas, you have a great career there. You play in the Red River rivalry. You guys win a lot of big games. You end up playing Alabama in the national championship. A lot of kids that I talk to, James, these events talk about how they want to play and start as a freshman. Tell these kids a little bit about how that balance of, if you're not an elite athlete and don't want to play, there's something wrong with you, but you want to play, but you also want to respect the upperclassmen that are in front of you. How did you handle that? Like, hey, I'm good enough to start right now as a freshman, but like you said, you had Quan and Billy and Jordan and a lot of good guys in front of you. How did you handle that? My time isn't now, but my time is coming.
It was really just understanding, that it's bigger than myself, right? I think a lot of come out of high school, everybody's the best, But, when you get to college, it's literally like an all-star team, whether it's at UT, UTSA, wherever you go, it's going to be talent, and you're going to get pushed every day. But for me, one of the sayings that we used to run with, and this is the words of Bobby Kennedy, my receiver coach at UT, was you have to earn your stripes. And I use that. I use those words up to this day. And it's so true. College football, high school football, once you get your job, once you get married, like you really gotta, it's an analogy or metaphor for you have to put the work in everything. If you want to be great, it takes time. And that's really that's the process. And you kind of learn it, it's the biggest thing I took away from that too, as far as waiting my time, is it taught me patience, and it taught me to be ready when your number is called, because that's really what it is, not really waiting for the opportunity, creating it, but once it comes, you gotta be on point and ready. So that's what taught me.
No, definitely. So let's fast forward again here. So one moment, I talked to a lot of kids, and I always ask me, and you were at the camp that day, how many of you kids want to play pro ball? And every arm goes up. It's a nice dream, and I'm not trying to squash any dreams, but there's a moment that every athlete goes through where they figure out, hey, I have a chance to play this game professionally, or B, yeah, I'm not that kind of player. Nothing wrong with that. When did you have your moment like, hey, I got a chance here to play at the next level, to make my dream a reality? When was that moment for you?
I think, well, to be honest, when I was going into going from high school to college, one of the biggest deals for me was I was going to go to a university where I had the best opportunity for the education first, but also to go to the next level. But once I actually got there, I looked around and I was like, man, this is going to be hard, right? Talent from everywhere across the country, the best. So I would say after my sophomore, going into my our junior year, we went to the national championship. And I think after my junior year, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready and I can compete, because we beat a lot of great teams. I was able to play against a lot of Hall of Famers via on my team or just against them in competition. And I pretty much felt like I held my own. So that gave me the confidence. It's like, okay, I think I'm ready and I'm good enough. I just got to keep putting the work in. And I was fortunate enough to get a free agent opportunity, and I pretty much ran with that opportunity. But I think there are moments once you get to that level where it's definitely going to be right in front of you, like, hey, this is a real legitimate opportunity, or I need to start thinking about the next phase. So,
Yeah. Well, let's fast forward again. Let's talk about now. So football's over now. And a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of players you probably know and maybe even played with that are still struggling when the game is over, when their eligibility is over. You are one of the few that have been blessed to kind of have a smooth transition. You're working for Tesla. You've got a new career coming up, which I want you to talk about. So talk about now post football. Football's over. That part of my life is done. What are you doing now? Tell these kids, hey, I'm done with football, but here's how I still compete, and this is what I'm doing now, and this is where another area as far as your music career that you're trying to make happen.
yes, sir. Yeah, I ended playing football in 2013. I played about like 2.5 years, and I got to a point where there wasn't a lot of stability. I was very nomadic, was moving around a lot, and I said, hey, I'm just going to go back to school, get my degree, and then we'll see what happens. Some different things happened, and I ended up getting a job. I ended up getting a front desk job for a rental company, a car rental company. And basically, that was the most humbling experience from the NFL,
Yeah.
going to work a front desk, greeting customers and renting them cars. But it also taught me that, okay, now I have to switch my focus that I've had on this sports. I'm going to take that and I'm going to translate it to real life after sports. Now I'm in a point where I've been able to work myself up from the mechanical engineering field, from distribution all the way up to manufacturing direct today. But I guess my biggest advice is just understanding what you're good at and just know that, I mean, what the genius that we have as athletes, I don't think we completely understand what we possess, as far as our intelligence. I mean, if you take a quarterback, for example, right, you call one play and there's 15 to 20 different audibles like that we have to complete this play in you got 7 seconds on the clock to make the right decision. Like that type of intelligence, the normal, I guess, person that's not in that situation, they haven't had to go through those type of trials and tests. But I think as athletes, sometimes we kind of downplay our intelligence and the brilliance that we possess to continue to be successful after the whatever game we're playing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Love that. Talk about the last part. So, we are at the showcase and I'm playing your latest single and the kids are vibing to it as they're warming up and people were asking like, hey, who was that? I said, the artist is standing right over there. Why don't you go ask him? So, it's always exciting. And, James, you know the saying, all athletes want to be rappers and all rappers want to be athletes.
Yep.
Talk about you're kind of one of the few to kind of make that really happen. Like, hey, not like I got skills, and I got bars and stuff. Like you're really making a career. Talk about your budding music career and how excited you are about that.
Yes, sir. That is something, music is something that's been in the back behind sports. I played clarinet growing up, bass clarinet. I played a little piano, did some choir coming up as well. As soon as I stopped playing, I immediately went out, bought some programs for making some beats, and then got a mic set up and just started recording. I've pretty much been recording for the past 7-8 years, but this past year I was able to land some pretty big placements. I've got a song with Busta Rhymes. I've got a song with Zaytoven, who's a pretty well-known producer within the trap music genre. I've had a lot of artists that a lot of people listen to actually reach out to me and try to work. I'm in the process now of working those details out, but it took me 7 years to get to a point where I could say, hey, okay, do I want to make a jump and pursue this full time, or do I want to keep working with my day job? So I just always knew it was something I wanted to pursue. And for me, my music's kind of like my getaway, like how sports was. I just found something that that made me happy, that makes me happy, and something that can, be therapeutic. Because at the end of the day, if we're not happy, it's like, what are you what do you stand for? What are you living for? So my thing is my happiness, sharing love, and setting the standard, having principles and standing on that. So I'm at a point now where I have the choice of, do I want to completely do music full time, or do I want to continue to work full time? But I'm currently in a situation where I'm doing both. And I think as time goes, it'll kind of figure it out itself.
Yeah. No, I think it's great advice because I think a lot of, obviously meeting a lot of players who are like, coach, I got skills and well, I'm going to be a rapper one day. And I'm like, well, that's great. But you still got to pay bills. You still got to
Oh,
eat.
yeah.
You got to put gas in the
Oh,
car.
yeah.
You still got to pay
Yeah.
rent. So
Yes,
I
sir.
love that when you shared your story at the showcase a few weeks back that you told them like, hey, yeah, I'd love to stop working full time and do this, rap career full time, but I'm not at that point yet. And so I think a lot of
Yeah.
kids, especially, and I hate to sound like an old guy, but this generation, they kind of want instant gratification and instant rewards, and it takes time. And I didn't even know that part of the story when you said you've been working on this now for 8 years. It isn't like you woke
Yep.
up on Monday and said, you know what, I'm a rapper. Somebody started giving me some money, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
be on playing with Drake and everybody else. It's like football. It's a long, hard process.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Music. You could speak to the professional world as far as working as well. It nothing starts at the top, right? You got to build the foundation. You got to lay that brick and keep building on that.
All right. Well, let's finish up here, James. So, for those players and coaches that are going to watch this podcast, if they're interested, What's the latest hit? What's the latest single? Where can they get it? Where can they download it? And tell them a little bit about that.
Yes, my latest single right now is "Run It Up" featuring Zaytoven. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, any DSP. My socials is Kirk_825. That's a representation of my music publication company I just started. It's called 825 Grind, and it's basically symbolizing the daily grind that everyone has to go to and has to go through, and continuing to keep your foot on the gas, and to continue to grind and keep building.
Great, man. James, I appreciate your time, man. I think I really do believe that a lot of the things you said are going to help at least one player who's going to watch it. But you know what? I need to make some changes in my life. If I'm going to make my goals a reality. So I definitely appreciate your time. I definitely appreciate you sharing your story. I wish you nothing but luck in your current career with Tesla and your forming rap career, that you can make that full time, man. Tell the family I said hi, your mom and the rest of your siblings, and I'll be seeing you soon. You're going to be hearing from me some other events coming up here. Okay.
All righty, sir. I appreciate it. Thank
All right.
you.
Have a good night. Thanks.
You too.